So who would you vote for then, if Andy Burnham was standing?
Whoever, Reform, or I'd vote anybody. I'd vote for Bugs Bunny, but for him.
That is a real voter in a real pub in Wigan on a real news broadcast. He'd rather vote for anyone other than Andy Burnham. And honestly, fair enough. That's politics. That's allowed. What is less fair, and what is the actual subject of the video, is the next bloke.
What they're going to do and they don't do it.
Who would get your vote then here?
I'd probably vote for Nigel Farage, if I was to vote.
And what is it about Nigel Farage? What is it about reform?
I just don't like how Starmer's let all these immigrants in.
Okay, I'm just going to hold it right there because, as I've said before, this channel doesn't go after the regular public. This is the bit where Sky News had a job to do, and Sky News did not do it. Nobody, not the reporter, not anyone, said, hang on, Starmer's only been in office less than 2 years. What are you actually talking about? The small boats crisis didn't start under Keir Starmer. It barely existed before 2018. And that year, under a Conservative government with Theresa May in number 10, 299 people crossed the channel in small boats. By 2022, also under a Conservative government, that number was 45,755. That was at its all-time peak, the biggest year in the history of small boat crisis on the Tories' watch. The Home Secretaries running that brief were Priti Patel and then Suella Braverman, both Conservatives. The Prime Ministers presiding over that chaos were Boris Johnson, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, all Conservatives. The man in the pub doesn't know that, because nobody told him. He turned on the news for about 14 years, watched the Tories shout about stopping the boats, watched the boats not being stopped, watched the Rwanda plan that flew nobody anywhere, and watched 4 different Home Secretaries promise to smash the gangs. And then watched the same broadcasters, the day after a Labour election win, suddenly start framing every single arrival as Keir Starmer's personal fault. So now, less than 2 years in the job, he's furious that Labour, for a crisis the Conservatives spent 6 years building up a backlog. And his solution? Vote reform. Right, so let's talk about reform.
So people are just turning against Labour, and I think reform is a breath of fresh air, really.
What is it about reform that appealed to you so much?
Reform, they seem to be for the British people. They want to put Britain first.
Breath of fresh air. Let me run through Reform's current parliamentary lineup. Lee Anderson, former Conservative for MP for Ashfield, defected in 2024. Sarah Pochin, the Reform MP for Runcorn, was a Conservative councillor. Danny Kruger, until September, was a Conservative Shadow Minister for Work and Pensions. Robert Jenrick, who was sitting on the actual Tory Shadow Cabinet just 5 months ago, joined Reform in January. Andrew Rosendale, also a sitting Conservative MP at the time, joined 3 days after Jenrick. And then there's Suella Braverman, the Conservative Home Secretary I mentioned a minute ago, who also joined Reform in January. Even Richard Tice was donating to the Conservative Party as recently as 2018. Every single Reform MP currently sitting in the House of Commons was, at some point, a Conservative Party member. Every single one. Best of Britain defection tracker last updated in the end of April put the total number of Tories who have crossed over to Reform at 177. 11 of those are former Conservative cabinet ministers. One of them, Nadhim Zahawi, was Boris Johnson's Chancellor of the Exchequer. He's in Reform now. So when the woman in Makerfield says that she wants something different from the Conservative, her answer is to vote Reform. What she's actually doing, mechanically, on the literal balance sheet of who sits in which party, is voting Conservative again. She just doesn't know it, because nobody's bothered to tell her. Which finally brings me to Andy Burnham. Look, I've got nothing against the guy personally. He was a health secretary before I got interested in politics. He's handled the Manchester Arena attack with more dignity than most cabinet ministers manage in their entire career, and he's built a serious profile as the mayor of Greater Manchester. Absolutely fine. But what is happening this week is genuinely stupid, and I do not understand how Labour have got themselves into this position. Andy Burnham quit being an MP in 2017. He did not lose his seat, he left voluntarily. In 2024, after winning a 3rd term, he stood up and pledged to serve the full term. We're now 24 months in and he's bailing on it. In January, he tried to come back through the Gorton and Denton by-election. Labour's NEC, the body that runs the Labour Party, the one the Prime Minister himself sits on, voted 8-1 against letting him stand. A Green won that seat instead. 4 months later, after Labour lost nearly 1,500 councillors in the May elections, the same NEC has somehow decided that Andy Burnham is exactly what the country needs, and the carpet is being unrolled for him in a constituency whose sitting MP, Josh Simons, the man who literally ran the campaign to put Keir Starmer in Downing Street in the first place, has agreed to fall on his sword to clear the path. So, if you're keeping score, the man who installed Starmer is now standing down so the man who wants to remove Starmer can have his seat. And we're being asked to pretend this is democracy, rather than a backroom reshuffle being processed through a polling station in Wigan. I'll be all over this by-election as it unfolds, so hit the subscribe button to catch the rest of it. But before we get to that count, there's a bigger problem worth saying out loud. In the 25 years between 1991 and 2016, the United Kingdom had 4 Prime Ministers: John Majors, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown and David Cameron. You could disagree with every one of them, as many of us did, but at least you know what you were voting for and who you were voting against. In the 10 years since 2016, we've had 5: May, Johnson, Truss, Sunak and Starmer. 3 of them came in 2022 alone. And now, less than 2 years from the last general election, we're openly discussing the 6th. That is not the country working. It is the country is just breaking. This is a Westminster problem. Westminster is currently a building full of people who keep swapping leaders to avoid asking the harder question, which is why nobody trusts any of them in the first place. The bloke in the pub looks at all this and then concludes that no party is worth trusting and that reform is a breath of fresh air. He's wrong about the second bit, but the first bit, honestly, can you blame him? That is the gap Reform have spotted, and every time Labour produce a circus like the one we're watching this week, that gap gets a bit wider. Every time the broadcasters film a vox pop in a pub without challenging a single false premise inside them, the gap gets wider still.
Reform are a bunch of con men and shysters and chancers.
But not everyone is convinced by Reform UK. Like Tony, now in his 50s, born and bred in Makerfield.
Because they all wear pink suit, pink ties. They're all hedge fund owners. They're all brokers from London. Their interest in Ashton Makerfield is zero. They have no conception about the issues and the challenges of people facing.
So it's Labour of any stripes, not just Andy Burnham.
Well, Andy Burnham is probably going to be the candidate. But it's going to be a tough ask.
Is the one bloke who actually sees it. He gets 30 seconds of airtime before Sky News goes off looking for something more dramatic. That's the bit that should worry you. Worry less about the voters who get it wrong. Worry about the voters who barely get it right and hardly make the cut. In a few weeks, give or take, Makerfield votes. Whichever way it goes, Burnham, Reform, Green, anyone, the conversation we should be having about all of this needs to start now, not after the count. Because at the moment, half the country is being asked to pick between 2 flavours of the same disaster, and the people whose job it is to point that out are running vox pops in pubs and calling it journalism.